I sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, looking at the people I used to call family. The room was dead silent, the kind of heavy silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. The air conditioning hummed faintly, but all I could hear was the steady beating of my own heart. My wife's funeral was barely a memory, and already the vultures were circling above me. My daughter-in-law Monica leaned forward, placing both her hands flat on the polished wood. She did not look like a grieving relative. She looked like a predator who had just cornered her exhausted prey. She slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto the table, the sharp smack echoing loudly in the quiet room. She smiled coldly, a look of pure arrogance. Now that the old woman is gone, she said, her voice dripping with venom, "You will put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself. You are done here, Richard. It is our turn now." I looked at my son Derek sitting right beside her. He looked down at his expensive shoes, too much of a coward to meet his father's eyes. They thought they had me completely backed into a corner. They truly believed a grieving 70-year-old man was an easy target, but they forgot exactly who built the empire they were trying to steal. I did not yell. I did not argue. I simply smiled, folded my hands together, and waited. Exactly 3 seconds later, the heavy boardroom doors swung open. My lawyer, Victor Lang, walked into the room. He did not say a single word. He just walked straight up to the table and dropped a certified DNA test right in front of Monica. "Before I tell you what that piece of paper said and how I utterly destroyed the people who tried to bury me alive, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you have ever had to stand up and teach an ungrateful family member a lesson they will never forget. To understand how we ended up in that tense boardroom, you have to go back exactly 3 days. The sweet scent of funeral lilies still hung thick in the air of my home. My Diane was gone. 45 years of beautiful marriage cut short by pancreatic cancer in a matter of a few brutal months. The house was painfully quiet now, empty in a way that made my chest physically ache. I stood alone at the kitchen sink, letting the warm water run over my hands as I washed a simple drinking glass. It was a mindless task, something to keep my hands busy, so my mind would not wander back to the empty chair in our living room. The granite counter felt cold under my hands. Diane had picked out that granite. She loved this kitchen. And now someone who never truly respected her was standing on her floor, demanding the fruits of her lifelong labor. That was when I heard the sharp, rapid click of expensive heels echoing on the hardwood floor. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. Monica strutted into the kitchen. There was not a single tear in her eyes. There was not a trace of sorrow on her perfectly made-up face. She was dressed in a sharp black designer suit, looking more like she was heading to a hostile corporate takeover than mourning the passing of her mother-in-law. Without a single word of comfort, without even bothering to ask how I was holding up after the hardest week of my life, she dropped a thick manila folder onto the counter. The sound was loud and deliberate. I looked down at the folder. Printed across the top page in bold black letters were the words, "Emergency Handover and Succession Agreement." I looked from the paper back up to Monica. "What is this, Monica?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level and calm. She sighed an exaggerated theatrical sigh, acting exactly as if she were dealing with a stubborn child. "It is for your own good, Richard," she said smoothly, leaning against the counter. "You are 70 years old. You just lost Diane. You are grieving, and you are in no condition to run Caldwell Logistics right now. You need to sign this agreement today so we can transfer the executive powers to Chase." Chase was my 18-year-old grandson, a boy who had barely managed to graduate high school and spent more time taking pictures of his sports cars for social media than he ever spent looking at a financial balance sheet. I stared at the legal document, feeling a cold, hard knot form deep in my stomach. Caldwell Logistics was not just a company to me. It was the blood, the sweat, and the tears of my entire adult life. Diane and I built that $15 million empire from a single rusty delivery truck back in 1985. We did not have wealthy investors. We had exactly $100 in our bank account and a shared dream. We spent our 20s eating cold sandwiches in freezing parking lots, sleeping in the cramped cab of that truck, and fighting tooth and nail for every single client we ever had. Diane kept the books on a fold-out table while I drove through blizzards to make deliveries. And now, only 3 days after I buried the woman who helped me build all of it, my daughter-in-law wanted me to hand the keys over to a teenager so she could pull the strings from the shadows. I did not raise my voice. I did not show her my anger. In business, the one who loses their temper is the one who loses the negotiation. I just looked at her and said, "The company is running just fine. I am grieving, Monica. I am not incapacitated." Right on cue, my son Derek walked into the kitchen. He was 42 years old, but standing next to his overbearing wife, he looked like a frightened little boy waiting for orders. He stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, putting on a highly rehearsed mask of deep concern. He was wearing a custom suit I bought for him, living a comfortable life I completely funded. Yet here he was, trying to put me out to pasture before the dirt on his mother's grave had even settled. "Dad, please just listen to her," Derek said softly, his voice trembling slightly. "The doctor said your blood pressure has been dangerously high since Mom got sick. We are terribly worried about you. We do not want to lose you too. Just sign the papers. Let Chase hold the title in the family trust, and Monica and I will handle all the daily operations for the company. You can finally rest and take care of yourself. You do not have to worry about a single thing anymore." It sounded so incredibly caring. It was the perfect plausible lie. A loving son and a concerned daughter-in-law stepping up to take a massive burden off an old man's shoulders. But I knew Derek better than anyone. I had spent millions of dollars on his elite Ivy League education, only to watch him become a weak man who could not make a single major decision without his wife's explicit permission. I looked at the expensive gold pen Monica had conveniently placed right next to the folder. "I will think about it," I said quietly, stepping back from the counter. "I need some time to read through the legal clauses before I sign anything." Derek nodded eagerly, clearly relieved that I had not flatly refused their demand. "Of course, Dad, take all the time you need," he said, forcing a warm smile. "Just do not wait too long. The market is very volatile right now, and the company needs steady leadership." They turned around together and walked out of the kitchen, their footsteps fading down the long hallway, leaving me alone with the stack of papers. I stood frozen by the counter, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest. I turned my head slowly toward the large bay window that looked out into the corridor. The glass was dark against the evening sky, acting like a perfect clear mirror. In the reflection, I saw Monica pause near the front door. She pulled her phone out of her designer purse and quickly began to type a message. She had absolutely no idea that I could see her reflection perfectly from where I stood. I watched closely as her fingers flew across the digital screen. I did not even need to guess what she was doing, because as she hit the send button, she muttered the words under her breath with a vicious, triumphant smirk on her face. "The old man took the bait," she whispered to herself, tucking the phone away. "Prep the shares." I stood alone in my quiet, empty kitchen, the warm water still dripping slowly from the faucet. They honestly thought I was a broken, clueless old widower who would just roll over and give up. They thought they had outsmarted me in my own home. But they were about to learn a very hard lesson. A lone wolf might lose his mate, but he never loses his teeth. And I was about to bite back hard. The next morning I woke up before the sun considered rising. I did not sleep much. The silence of the house without Diane was suffocating. The heavy realization of my own family conspiring against me made the air feel even thinner. I needed the familiar hum of my empire to clear my head. I needed to stand in the halls of Caldwell Logistics and remember exactly who I was before I became an old widower in the eyes of my greedy children. By 6 in the morning, I was pulling my car into the executive parking lot. The crisp morning air felt sharp against my face as I walked up to the towering glass building. This place was my sanctuary. I had poured every ounce of my energy into these walls. I walked through the quiet lobby, nodding to the night shift security guard, and took the private elevator straight up to the executive floor. I bypassed my own office and headed directly for the executive archives at the end of the corridor. The archives held the backup records of every major financial transaction and trust document associated with Caldwell Logistics. If Monica and Derek were planning a hostile takeover, they would need to alter the foundational operating agreements. I reached the heavy security door and pulled my master keycard from my pocket. I swiped the plastic card against the electronic reader, expecting the familiar green light and the mechanical click of the unlocking mechanism. Instead, the keypad beeped a harsh, flat tone. The small light blinked a solid, angry red. Access denied. I stared at the glowing digital panel. My card was the master key. It was programmed to never expire and to grant unlimited access to every single room in the building. I swiped the card a second time. The reader beeped again. Red light. Access denied. I swiped it a third time, pressing the plastic against the sensor. Red light. Access completely denied. Are you having some trouble with the door, Richard? The voice came from the shadows near the break room, startlingly loud in the quiet hallway. I turned around slowly. Stepping out into the dim morning light was Bradley Jenkins. Bradley was our chief financial officer. He was 45 years old and wore custom-tailored suits. He was wearing far too much expensive cologne. The heavy scent of musk and cedar rolled off him in waves that made my stomach turn. He walked toward me with a rehearsed plastic smile plastered across his face. He looked entirely too awake and far too comfortable for 6 in the morning. Bradley, I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and steady. My master keycard seems to be malfunctioning. It is rejecting my clearance for the executive archives. Bradley stopped a few feet away from me, tucking his manicured hands into his pockets. Oh, right, he said, his smile widening just a fraction. I should have warned you. We are running a massive system update on the security servers this weekend. Derek ordered a complete overhaul of the digital access protocols to ensure our corporate data remains secure. The system is temporarily restricting access to all sensitive areas while the technicians migrate the files. Derek ordered it. I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the empty corridor. Bradley nodded smoothly, completely unfazed. Yes, Derek thought it was best to handle the security migration now. He mentioned you would be taking an extended leave of absence to mourn Diane, so he took the initiative to approve the technology overhaul. Do not worry about a thing, Richard. We have everything completely under control. You should go home and get some rest. I looked into Bradley Jenkins' eyes. They were cold, calculating, and full of silent mockery. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew that I knew. They were locking me out of my own company. They were building a digital fortress to hide whatever financial crimes they were currently committing. They were using my son as the face of the operation. The old Richard would have grabbed Bradley by his silk tie and thrown him through the glass doors. I would have demanded the security team break the archive lock immediately. But the man standing there now was a seasoned corporate veteran. If I caused a scene, I would show my hand. I would give them a reason to claim I was acting erratically due to grief. I would give Monica exactly what she needed to prove I was mentally unfit to lead. I am not going to argue with you, Bradley, I said smoothly, forcing a polite nod. I suppose a security update is long overdue. Tell Derek I appreciate his sudden interest in our data protection. I turned my back on the chief financial officer and walked calmly toward my private office. I could feel his arrogant gaze burning into my back as I walked away, but I did not look back. I stepped into my office and locked the heavy oak door behind me. I sat down in my leather chair. They thought shutting off my keycard would blind me. They thought they controlled the flow of information because they controlled the modern servers. but they fundamentally misunderstood how an old wolf protects his territory. I reached down and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pressed my thumb against a biometric scanner hidden underneath the wooden panel. A small click echoed in the quiet room. A secret compartment slid open. Inside rested a thick, dust-covered external hard drive. I did not need their network access. 10 years ago, anticipating corporate espionage, I had a backdoor coded directly into the mainframe. This hard drive contained an offline mirror of every digital skeleton buried in Caldwell Logistics. I connected the heavy drive to my secure laptop. The screen flickered to life, prompting me for a sequence of encrypted passwords only I knew. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was moments away from bypassing their pathetic firewall and exposing whatever rot Monica and Bradley were hiding in my financial records. I took a deep breath, ready to strike the first blow in this silent war. Before my finger could press the enter key, the sharp ringing of my private cell phone shattered the silence. I jumped slightly, pulling my hand back from the keyboard. Very few people had this personal number. Absolutely no one should be calling it at 6:30 in the morning. I pulled the phone from my jacket pocket and looked at the glowing screen. The caller identification displayed the name of the local county hospital. A cold wave of dread washed over me. Hospitals do not call at dawn with good news. I accepted the call and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Richard Caldwell," a woman asked. Her tone was strictly professional, but carried an undeniable weight of urgency. "This is the emergency department at Memorial Hospital. I am calling regarding your grandson, Chase Caldwell. He has been in a severe motorcycle accident. He is currently in the trauma unit, and we need family members here immediately." I slammed the laptop shut and shoved the encrypted hard drive back into the hidden compartment of my heavy oak desk. The digital war for Caldwell Logistics would simply have to wait. My grandson was currently bleeding. I grabbed my car keys with shaking hands, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sprinted out of my private office, completely ignoring the confused and annoyed look on Bradley Jenkins' face as I rushed past the corporate break room. I slammed my hand against the elevator button, my mind racing with terrifying images of Chase lying broken on the cold asphalt. He was a reckless teenager with far too much money and far too little sense, but he was still my family. He was the only heir Diane had truly doted on during her final years. The drive to Memorial Hospital was a terrifying blur of flashing traffic lights, blaring horns, and reckless swerves through the morning traffic. I broke every single speed limit in the city, gripping the cold leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned completely white and my forearms ached with tension. I pushed the accelerator all the way to the floorboard, praying silently that I would not be too late. I abandoned my car in the emergency drop-off zone, not caring about the parking violation, and burst through the sliding glass doors of the hospital. The harsh fluorescent lights of the trauma ward stung my tired eyes. The overwhelming smell of cheap antiseptic and stale waiting room coffee filled the chilly morning air. I spotted them immediately at the far end of the long, sterile hallway. Monica was pacing back and forth, her expensive designer heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic tempo against the polished linoleum floor. She was furiously typing on her smartphone, looking significantly more inconvenienced than devastated. Derek sat slumped in an uncomfortable plastic waiting room chair with his head buried deep in his hands. His tailored suit was severely wrinkled, and his broad shoulders shook slightly under the bright hospital lights. I hurried down the hallway, my heavy footsteps announcing my sudden arrival. Derek looked up, his face extremely pale and slick with a nervous sweat. "Dad," he choked out, standing up quickly and wiping his hands on his trousers. "I got here as fast as I possibly could," I said, grabbing his shaking shoulders. "What exactly happened out there, and how bad is his condition right now?" Derek swallowed hard, his anxious eyes darting toward Monica, who had finally stopped typing to look at me with mild annoyance. "He took a sharp corner way too fast on that brand new sports motorcycle," Derek explained, his voice trembling noticeably. He lost control of the bike and slid directly into a steel guardrail on the busy highway. He was wearing his protective helmet, thank God, so there is no severe brain damage or spinal trauma. But he suffered a very deep laceration on his left thigh and some minor internal bruising around his ribs. He lost a significant amount of blood at the scene of the accident before the paramedics could arrive and apply a proper tourniquet. Monica aggressively crossed her arms over her chest, letting out a sharp, highly frustrated sigh that echoed loudly in the quiet corridor. "It is a complete and utter disaster, Richard. We were strictly scheduled to finalize the executive trust transfer this afternoon, and now we are stuck sitting in this miserable waiting room." I stared at her, completely appalled by her absolute lack of basic maternal concern. Her teenage son was lying on a surgical operating table, and she was only worried about a corporate handover schedule. Before I could formally reprimand her for her stunning callousness, the heavy double doors of the trauma bay swung open. A very tired-looking attending physician stepped out into the quiet waiting area. He wore blue surgical scrubs that were visibly stained with small dark spots of fresh blood. His blue surgical mask was pulled down around his neck, revealing a deeply lined, physically exhausted face. "Family of Chase Caldwell." He called out loudly, his authoritative voice echoing down the hospital corridor. We rushed forward together, forming a tight, anxious circle around the exhausted medical professional. "He is medically stable for the moment," the physician said, holding up a thick metal clipboard and clicking his pen. "We managed to successfully stop the primary hemorrhaging in his upper leg, and his vital signs are currently holding steady on the monitors. However, his overall hemoglobin levels are dropping to a critically low point. We need to administer a massive blood transfusion immediately to prevent him from slipping into severe hypovolemic shock." Derek let out a loud, shuddering breath of profound relief, leaning heavily against the painted drywall for physical support. "Then do it immediately," Monica demanded, waving her manicured hand dismissively at the doctor. "Give him the required blood and patch him up quickly so we can finally get out of this depressing place. We have a private, luxurious recovery suite waiting for him at our home." The doctor frowned deeply, clearly unimpressed by Monica and her highly demanding, arrogant attitude. "It is not that simple, ma'am," he said, his professional tone growing noticeably firm and uncompromising. "Your son has a very rare and specific blood type. He is AB positive. Under normal daily circumstances, this would not be a massive logistical issue. But our hospital blood bank experienced an unprecedented shortage this week due to a multi-car pileup on the interstate. We simply do not have enough AB positive or universal donor blood in our immediate hospital inventory to safely and fully complete the required transfusion." He looked directly at Derek, then shifted his serious gaze to Monica. "We need direct family donors right now, immediately. The boy desperately needs blood, and he needs it flowing into his veins within the next hour to survive. We can bring you both into the lab and cross-match you immediately to save his life." The world around me seemed to halt completely. The low mechanical hum of the hospital ventilation system faded entirely away. The distant rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitors went dead in my ringing ears. The attending doctor's specific words echoed loudly in my mind, repeating over and over again like a broken skipping record. A B positive. The boy is a B positive. My mind, rigorously trained over decades to analyze complex corporate data and detect absolute factual inconsistencies, immediately latched onto a monumental, undeniable biological impossibility. I am an O blood type. My beloved late wife Diane was an O blood type. By the absolute unbreakable scientific laws of human genetics, two biological parents with type O blood can only ever produce children with type O blood. Therefore, my biological son Derek was undeniably factually an O blood type. I knew this for an absolute fact. I vividly remembered the medical paperwork from his severe childhood appendectomy surgeries. Monica, I knew from a brief conversation years ago during a minor family medical scare, was an A blood type. I stood perfectly still in the sterile hospital corridor, staring blankly at the white wall directly behind the doctor. Basic high school biology began to scream blaring alarms deep inside my head. An O blood type parent and an A blood type parent can naturally produce an A blood type child. They can occasionally produce an O blood type child. But they cannot, under any conceivable scientific circumstance, ever produce an AB positive child. The dominant B allele had to come from somewhere. It had to come directly from a biological father who actively carried the B genetic trait. Derek absolutely did not carry it. I absolutely did not carry it. Diane absolutely did not carry it. There was only one impossible, horrifying, devastating conclusion staring me right in the face in that bright hallway. The teenage boy bleeding out on the surgical operating table, the boy I had spoiled and loved and rigorously prepared to inherit my $15 million logistics empire, did not have a single solitary drop of Caldwell blood running through his veins. Chase was not my biological grandson. I slowly turned my heavy head to look at Monica. She was furiously arguing with the tired doctor, loudly demanding he call another private hospital to fly the necessary blood